Hi, my name is James and I'm founder of Inspo, a student mentoring platform. My background is in recruitment and I have actually built a recruitment business with 3 friends, which now has 6 offices around the world. I'm also a parent of 2 kids, and during COVID, they were either leaving or joining university. And this is where my recruitment background came into use. My son, for instance, was interested in getting into marketing, and through my network, I was able to introduce him to a couple of chief marketing officers, and he had a few conversations with them and worked out that marketing was definitely not for him. As part of my job, I also get to meet students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and this gave us the inspiration to build and launch Inspo last year, helping students from disadvantaged backgrounds. And I'm fortunate enough to be on this call today with Lee from Diverse Talent Networks and with Linda, who is an expert in this space as well. I'm also joined by Leilani and Youssef, who work with me, who are recent graduates, so have lots of interesting information to share about studying and trying to find a job as well. It would be great if Youssef, if you could say a few words too, just to introduce yourself, please.
So hi, I'm Youssef. Like Jamie mentioned, I'm a recent grad. So I graduated from my master's in anthropology in September of 2021. And I am from Kuwait. So I've been trying to bring international student perspectives to Inspo for the time that I've been here. And I do product and social media for Inspo. And a lot of that involves working hand in glove with my colleague, Leilani.
Hi, I'm Leilani. As Youssef said, we work really closely together, mainly on social media stuff because he knows nothing about TikTok. I mainly focus though on student engagement and customer success. This has been really fun. I'm a people person, so I really enjoy it.
And Linda, would you like to just quickly introduce yourself as well, please?
Hi, my name is Linda Funke. I am from the United States originally, but have spent my adult life primarily in Germany and in the United Kingdom, as well as with assignments in other countries. I've worked in the consulting industry and financial services industry, as well as quite a lot of engagement in the nonprofit sector. My roles have had a lot to do with human resources and also with managing people from, really in every possible position within organizations. And I have always loved that, working with people and helping them to achieve their goals.
Fantastic. And Lee, thank you for inviting us on today. It would be obviously all your clients know who you are, but are you going to say a few words too?
I can say a few words. Yeah, I'm Lee Higgins, founder of Diverse Talent Networks. My background is in recruitment and executive search, predominantly across financial services, and I've recruited globally over the last 25 odd years. I lose count. And I set up Diverse Talent Networks because for me personally, I just felt that, the world isn't a meritocracy, and there are a lot of individuals from, historically underrepresented groups that just don't have an opportunity to get to meet people of influence. A lot of the senior leadership within organizations globally is still predominantly white males. And what I felt was that all of the leaders in organizations that we're connecting with could do with expanding their networks, making them more diverse, widening the talent pool. And on the flip side of that, it's about giving talent, experienced talent, the opportunity to connect with those leaders, the leaders that want to take meaningful action on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just make that human connection. And then people can remove all that pressure of interviews and have a very open, transparent, pressure-free conversation about their careers and about their businesses, which I think is, we've signed some amazing brands and we're getting some really good traction. But on a personal note, I come from a working class background. I was the first person in my family to go to university, and I just had no idea of, how to apply for a job, what type of job I could do. The career advice was non-existent when I'm at my school. I think it was like I was good at sports, so it was like, oh, you can be a PE teacher, was kind of the only advice I had. And because my family hadn't gone down the professional route, it was really difficult for me to then navigate finding that first job. So this is very close to my heart, and look forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. Well, I think the first conversation we're going to have today is about skills, particularly in relevance to students. What do they have? What do they need? And there's obviously a mismatch. So how shall we, now we need to work out how we decide to do this conversation. So
yeah, I think so for me, I think the most important thing is, what skills do you have and how do you apply those skills to the workplace? So, the advice I got was, well, you're good at sports, so you could be a PE teacher. But I think it's getting, today, the next generation, when I think about my own children and much younger, it's like, well, how do they get to understand the skills, the talent they have, and how can they apply that in exchange for money, basically, and fulfillment.
I think a lot of students miss the point that, Lee, you're absolutely right. They don't realize the skills that they have, or that the value of their experiences. But I think they also don't understand, in addition to that, the transferability of those. So, for example, when I was studying politics, and I was like, okay, I have to work in politics, and that was a source of anxiety for me. Not realizing that these are it just teaches you how to think rather than what you're actually learning. And so you could take that knowledge into anything. And I think that's something students aren't usually told. I don't know if that was your experience as well, Leilani.
Yeah, I think also I had the same experience in terms of politics. I did not want to go into politics. Like, I knew I enjoyed studying it, but I didn't want to be in the field. And I didn't have an experience anywhere else, or so I thought. But I had done a whole load of part-time work through necessity, not because I enjoyed working, but I didn't realize that those skills that I was learning, or the work that I was doing, was looking good and was showing that I was showing up, that I was good working in a team, that I had all this extra experience that other people didn't have.
Yeah, because what was that work, just out of curiosity, that part-time work?
Mainly just sort of front of house, customer service stuff. Because, as I said earlier, I'm a bit of a people person. I just like talking to people. So I found myself doing those kind of jobs sort of every time I applied for a job. And it was just, I needed to pay for my rent when I was at uni. I just needed food. I just needed to pay for rent because my student loan wasn't big enough. And it got me so far.
It's really interesting though, isn't it?
How did you go along that process of discovery to where you were trying to figure out, how do I articulate how do I even know what skills I have, and how do I articulate them to potential employers?
I don't think I knew. I think I was just on my CV. It just existed as, this was my last job and this is what I did. And so naturally I progressed into the same sort of roles. And as I graduated, I actually had help from my grandfather, and he had his own business, and he was explaining to me that the things that I had on my CV were not just I was working with stock. It wasn't just I was handling money. It was more than that, and it was, these skills were transferable. I think it was just about someone older than me, someone that had been in the workforce, kind of explaining that it wasn't just a Saturday job. It wasn't just something you were doing to get money.
Right. So I think that when that's really important, what you and Yusuf are saying about trying to identify this transferability of skills, because employers are looking not just at what you have done or have studied specifically. They are looking at what you offer in terms of potential for the future. And they have, you have to help them to kind of expand their imagination about what you can do. And so you kind of need to go out into the world a little bit yourself and understand what those skills are that you actually possess. So I don't know, for example, if your universities have any resources where you're able to take a look at what skills you have, or if you, for example, I don't know if either of you have done any examination yourself, or like personality testing or anything like that, to help you think a little bit about what it is that you bring to the table. Kind of like Leilani, you said, I know I'm a people person, but is there more than that? How did you identify your skills?
It's really funny you mentioned personality tests, because actually my girlfriend just applied to a job and they had her do a personality test before her interview, because they were looking, I guess, for specific personality types. I think for me, and I'm not sure if you agree, but for me, I'd never thought of those as anything other than a for fun type of thing to share with my friends. But once I heard that this is what my girlfriend had to do, I was like, that makes a lot of sense, because you can see, like, it's like a window into a person. It's not quite who they are, but it's a first impression. I think for me, at least, my instinct was, because you hear like the stereotypes of what you need are like, you need experience and you need to build your skills and you need to build your references. That's what I kept leaning on. So for me, for example, this job, Jamie, was listed as marketing executive when Leilani and I applied. And I was like, okay, I have some experience in that. I think I can get in. And it was just out of necessity, right? But then, like, after the fact is when you learn in retrospect, oh, these are the skills that I learned here that I've now transferred into this job. So I think for a lot of us, it's like hindsight rather than a proactive, these are the skills that I have. This is how I'm going to translate them.
So I think frequently in the case of, for example, liberal art, areas of what we call liberal arts, which both of you have studied, if I were to ask students who were considering applying to our firm, for example, what skills do you have from your university situation that is making you, that you can transfer to a role in financial services, for example? Like, what would you think if you'd studied anthropology or something? And they would say, nothing. Well, so I thought, well, okay, let's think about this. You've learned critical thinking skills. You've probably learned forms of analysis. You've learned methodological approaches. You've learned, so there's some very specific kind of hard, they're very specific skills that you have learned that teach you to work with statistics, for example. Right. And so then I know one of the other questions that they wanted us to think about today is, then how do you get the skills that you need? So if you know about statistics, but they're really looking for somebody who can do Excel modeling, then, or you figure they're going to ask you that, then how do you do that? How do you identify some of those specific skills, and then how do you get them? Or what have other students done that you know of to kind of help them brush up on skills that would be good?
Do you think you need an encyclopedia of skills that are relevant for the workplace, and how to work out what you're gaining through your study, but also what you're gaining through extracurricular activities? Like, for instance, if you hold a position in a society, or if you're a member of a sports team, or if you're, as Leilani is, or Youssef has been as well, front of house in a restaurant, and the skills that you learn from dealing with customers, for instance, I think they're so relevant, but it's enabling the student to understand what they should be adding to their CV and how to sell those skills when they go for interview or when they're presenting their CV.
Could we flip the question around on you guys, especially Leah and Jamie, because you guys have the background in recruitment? I don't want to say mistakes, but what do you see students doing? Are there certain trends that you think they could do something better or something like that?
One of the biggest learning points, and Lee, I don't know if you agree with this, is that, as you know, when we, as part of inspo, one of the sessions is going through student CVs and their covering letters and helping them to present them correctly for when they're going for interviews. And one of the things that is normally missing from a student CV is what societies they've been in, which is they need to add that because there's so much useful talking point there as well. And it's an embellishment, if you like, on their experiences at uni. And then the other thing to work on is any part-time work they've been doing, even if it's working in the supermarket as a shelf stacker. That sort of information, how you're dealing with your colleagues, how you've got to be on time, you've got to get to work. And I know these sounds like very benign situations, but they are overlooked, and they should be incorporated in your CV.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. In some of the mentoring I've done, it's for me, and maybe I was like that when I was, at school doing my A-levels and then thinking about going to a university. But it's that appreciating the work you're doing and just being genuinely curious about how that business works. So I worked in a bakery during my A-levels, last year of school and A-levels. I had to go to a sixth form college because it was a state school. But I was always interested in, well, how do we know how much bread to bake and how many cakes to make? And I used to speak to the owner, Noel, who would say, well, we forecast that based on sales. So you get an understanding of the production, and then you get a bit of exposure to producing the goods, but then also the serving of those goods, right? So if you're genuinely curious, and I didn't apply that at all. I was asking those questions, but I never applied that in an interview process. But now I would say to anyone that's going through, doing part-time jobs, engaging, in a business or with customers, that to really be curious about that. How does it all work? How does it fit together? Because that's the same as any business. You produce something and then you've got to sell it. And so I think you can gain a lot from those experiences. And I think that's where perhaps, students can really gain an advantage, is by showing their intellectual curiosity and then being able to say, right, well, I've worked in this business and I understand the pressures and understand how it operates. I was always probing. That for me would stand out a mile.
Do you think that schools do enough to promote the idea of skills and how they are utilized in the workplace? So going back to your example, Linda, of Excel and doing stats, for instance, you might do that if you're doing maths and you're thinking, okay, obviously you'll be doing that if you're doing maths, but even a degree like geography or psychology, you'll be doing statistics because you'll be having to analyze data series. But you don't know. But then do the students at school or at university know that how important that is and how it can be applied to the process? That's a question for Yusuf and Lalani, I guess.
Speaking, obviously I went to school in Kuwait until I was 17, but there at least, what's interesting about the American system at least is that they give you a lot of choice in what you can do, but obviously that choice is unguided. They give you a little pamphlet with what each little elective class entails, and you choose. There's not that hand holding that I think is sometimes necessary to figure out what exactly is most useful for the future. So yeah, like in that way, there's a lack of support. And then going into uni, for me, it was even less, right? Because there's so much more independence in uni. So there's never, at no point within the structure of a school, unless you proactively seek out a careers team, which is often overloaded, they don't explain to you, oh, you might need like an intermediate understanding of Excel. You might need this or that to be able to get into this or that job. So it's a case of people saying, I want to get into this job, but I don't know the skills. I don't know the experience needed. I don't know how to sell myself specifically for this job. And I think that's where our mentoring at least is coming in handy.
What do you think, Alani? Yeah.
I don't think I can talk too much, similar to Yusuf, on the school system in the UK, only because I went to a private school. I was lucky enough to go to a private school. And I think they do a lot more hand holding than your typical state school. So I know that my sister went to a state school, and for up until secondary school, there was a lot less hand holding than I got. And we had a careers team. So we had a careers person who would come at sessions with us and explain things. I would say there's still a slight lack of hand holding. So there isn't that It's more, what do you think you need if you want to get into that career? So they'd make us go and do the research. And I think they kind of just explained it really simply. So when we were choosing A levels, I wanted to do physics and math because I was going to be an engineer. And as we discussed earlier, I went into politics. That wasn't because like I had gained this crazy knowledge and I was like, oh, engineering isn't for me. It's simply because the school said the grades that you got, we don't think you'd be good enough to do that physics and math. So it was kind of just very frank conversations they had and saying like the skills that we think you have or the skills that you think you have, we don't think you have them. So I'd say in private school, I think there was more hand-holding. It was a bit more structured in terms of honesty and this is what you need, as opposed to other schools.
Is that driven by schools wanting to keep their stats up though? Do you know what I mean? Like you should be wanting to do a subject that you're passionate about, that you might be fulfilled by, and actually you're getting steered in a different direction because they want all their students to get the best grades possible, even in state. So in my state school experience, yeah, you were, maybe that was less the case then, but it's definitely more now, where they're actually allowing kids to do subjects, because they know it will improve their own stats. But the advice, like, I just felt what was missing and what's still missing, just talking to my, kids, is you're learning this because you can apply it here in the real world. Even like they're learning Python at school, right? Brilliant. Do you know why you're learning Python? What? I have no idea. I'm just been told I've got to learn this. Okay. So like you could, just pick up any McKinsey report, right, as a teacher and say, right, this is why Python is important. And I think if you start engaging children more and more, if you give them a bit of evidence as to why that learning is important, they might take note. But that's still missing for me in a big way. And then that just has a massive knock-on effect because kids just don't want to learn in the same way, or they're relying on a really enthusiastic teacher that can engage them.
I think that's so true. I remember learning quadratic equations at school and thinking, why am I learning about the rate of flow of water out of a cone? I don't give a monkeys about that. But if I knew that that would be used to become a fixed income derivatives trader and I'd be earning squillions a year, then I might have paid more attention in that. But
is that what it's for? Brilliant. I've just learned
there is quite a debate actually in math. I mean, mathematics, as someone who sat on a school board of directors for a decade, I personally think that mathematics curricula needs to be seriously reformed because it's mostly being taught like everybody is supposed to, they don't teach you, the way that they teach mathematics is, or let's say this, if you, in English, they teach you sort of, you have your basics, how to speak, how to use it, how to apply it in your everyday life. And then they have the people who study it as an academic topic, okay? Academic, literature, all of that, right? But with mathematics, they don't seem to continue to focus on how do I use mathematics in my everyday life? All the things that people need to know about money and, reading statistics, everything, right? Instead, they take you off into this whole academic thing about everybody having to learn quadratic equations and the flows of this and that. And then, unfortunately, most people who really, we could all use more of the nuts and bolts business for years and years and years. And instead, they take you into quadratic equations, which is when you say, many people just, if they could, they would leave it.
Yeah.
But I was going to say with regard, it's quite interesting to me. And I think to listen to these quite formative and young experiences, right, about how a school system is either directly or indirectly sort of pushing you and encouraging or discouraging you in particular directions, maybe even for their own agenda. But I would say that when you're thinking about the career transition level, there are a lot of students out there who come from, for example, as Yusuf does, who come from different, universities, who come from different backgrounds, different schooling systems, different countries, different whatever it is. And so I think for students who are trying to think about, what skills do I have and how can I apply them to the marketplace? I really encourage students to, first of all, just take a look at the people that have graduated in the past from your program. Take a look at where they have gone and what they're doing. Many universities, right? They have lists of alumni. Maybe they also have a way to connect you with people, either from your major, from related majors, areas of study that you could talk to. And then I would also think about, one of the reasons I just mentioned this before about the personality testing. I think that this is quite relevant to maybe where you would select where you want to work, but those types of tests, whether you do them for fun or for serious reasons, they can give you ideas about where you can apply your skills. Because it turns out when you're doing them that you have a preference for doing this or doing that, then they'll give you lists of 20 career options, right? And help you to think about where your skills could be applied, and then also how to articulate your own skills better.
Yeah.
And are those
informational interviews? Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, Linda, are those tests easily accessible for people?
Yes, they are actually.
Okay,
So I would always check at the University Career Center to see what they have always, right? They have databases, they have got these, they have got hopefully organizations to which they're connected or subscribe or something like that. And also just things like the government services that they might have for job seekers, right? Just having access to those things, there are actually a lot of resources in there where you can find names of people, and most people want to help. So get some names off of a database and write them a nice note and say, I'd like to understand how you've used your anthropology degree to get into this particular field. How did you feel that it was related, not related? What was good? What, this kind of a thing. But the other thing is that some of the most well-known ones, I'm just going to say Myers-Briggs or these other ones, which really cost, quite a bit of money to access. You can go online, and there are many firms that have developed condensed versions of these assessments, and take those, and they're pretty good. They get you at least a good part of the way there, generate sort of 20 options for you or something. And then so again, it's about, I think it's a part of this exploration and discovery and trying to, or being curious, opening your mind to where you could go, because clearly, both Lonnie and Yusuf, everybody's, said that what you studied didn't necessarily, and how you studied, or the people that you were learning from, they weren't necessarily able to make the connection to where you were going to go. So
I will say that these personality tests are really useful, because when I was about 13 or 14, my school made us do Moresby tests, and we answered a whole load of questions, and then we got these reports, and every so often I still look at my report, but it kind of states what your personality is like, what kind of skills you have. So whether you're more analytical, whether you're more like you're good with words, and what careers they suggested based on it. And I will say that it's kind of accurate, because although I diverted and I was like, no, I want to be an engineer, even though it says I'm really good with words, I have ended up being one of the careers that they suggested.
Yeah.
So I think they're very helpful.
Is there a tool out there, if we're talking about skills, and if we talk about skills gaps, so say that your personality questionnaire says that you should be you might be interested in the career in X. Is there a way of finding out what skills you need for that, and then you could do a table of what skills you have and what you're missing, or what you need to acquire to have a better chance of succeeding in that area?
So I haven't seen a tool specifically, but I certainly think that it would be very useful to do what you said, which is to set up a table for yourself and just say, what is it that is being looked for when in these particular roles? So let's say at the moment that it's not necessarily, you could, of course, shift and look at roles that are being offered and what skills that they like. You'll find out also from doing informational interviews with people that have graduated in the last couple of years from your program, or your friend's friend's friend who is now working in some role that you think is interesting. That's one of the questions you should ask. What skills do they really want, and how well prepared for you? How can I fill that gap? So, I mean, I know many young people who have identified the gaps themselves, and they, you do an Excel course online. You do, you can do a small, there's certificate programs out there. Some of them are free. Some of them you pay for to fill the gap. And I think when you are in an interview process, sometimes they're going to really test you on those skills to see if you have a certain level. Other times, it's not about knowing it all before you get there. It's never, you never know it all before you get there. It's about understanding the thinking behind it, the approach, your curiosity. At least when they say Excel modeling, what they mean.
Yeah, I think another resource that, especially for younger people, they might find useful is career coaches and like career influencers, because oftentimes the whole process feels quite formal. And so like a way to inject some personality and a bit of connection is to follow someone. So for example, with inspo, we've worked with a guy called Corporate Steve, who's got a great following on TikTok, and he just has a very casual way of explaining certain things and take questions from people. There's so many of these influencers out there, and it's a really nice way to be able to relate to someone while getting the advice you need.
No, that's good. I mean, I think this is a topic we could talk for hours about, I think, but that shows how important it is, right? You've got to understand what skills you have, how do you apply them, and it can help you hopefully find a job that you're going to be really fulfilled in.